Hi everybody, welcome to another Broken Meeple Express review. I'm Luke Hector, and if you like what you see, please remember to leave a thumbs up and comment on the video so that I can engage with you about what you think of this game, what you think of the video, and what you think of similar games to this. And always remember that Patreon is always running if you want to help support that channel and keep it running. So today, with this motley collection of psychedelic artwork style components, I'm taking a look at the loop. I'm a bit overdue for getting this one reviewed, so I do apologise for that. I wanted to do this ideally before Christmas, but things just didn't go that way. But now I can tackle this cooperative game, which has been divisive among people, I think. You know, there are some people who really love this, but I have seen some people go, this was kind of meh, this wasn't that great, you know, whatever. And I'm not seeing it get a ton of buzz overall. Like, it's not like this is selling out in shops or anything, it was just a bit hard to get it in the UK for a while. Now it's a little bit easier, I believe. So what happens in the loop is that you've effectively got this mad scientist who's running around messing up time. You are part of this agency, I forget what they're called, the time agency or something, and the TVA I like to nickname them as. I mean, Loki's a really great series, I call them the TVA. But the idea is that on this board, you have this little contraption machine that you slot in the middle, and what you are doing is, with your various characters that are represented by these giant meeples, like these crazy sized meeples, you essentially are going around to different eras or zones on the board, and you're trying to meet the conditions of various goals that you've got to do. You've got to get 4 of these done before the end of the game, and they might be a case of, you know, have no tokens in this era, or you've got to destroy an agent in 6 different eras, whatever. You've got these different conditions, you're trying to meet them. The problem is, much like every cooperative game, there's 100 ways to lose and only 1 way to win. Here, you're on a ticking timer. You have a board on the side which is using these cards that dictate each round where bad stuff happens, and if you go for it 3 times, the game ends. You will never end the game that way, I promise you that. More on that a bit later. But on top of that, you're also dropping these cubes. There's some green ones here for energy, there's red ones in the box for the bad stuff for him. And essentially, you drop them in this little contraption here, and they go out into either one of 3 different zones, the one it's facing and the 2 neighbouring sides. Get too many of these red cubes over in a zone, it causes like a paradox, like some major problem happens, and the gold tile that was there flips over and you lose all your progress. Believe me, that hurts. But mainly, you'll get these other tokens, which I'm trying to find, here we go. Whoop, a warp token that goes on the side of the board and basically is one of the other ways you can lose the game. I think if you get more than 2 of these, then it all goes to pot, or if the same one happens twice, it all goes to pot. Like I say, those are the 2 ways the game will generally end. But, you know, there's 3 ways you can lose. And the idea is that you're basically using your character abilities as well as these cards, which represent all these weird, funky items from history. I mean, you get random punchline generator, time-proof coat, confusion dart launch shotgun, sniper shotgun, mechanical grappling hook, an iconic temporal graph. You know, there's a lot of various in-jokes for nostalgia, but mainly it's all just like wibbly-wobbly, timey-wimey stuff. But all of these have got different abilities. You have your starter deck of cards. You can acquire more cards in order to, not so much deck build, but you can basically get more powerful artifacts in order to utilize their abilities. But you have to work with the other players in the team to mitigate those red cubes, deal with these agents that are all over the place. I think they're called agents, or they're called clones, I think actually, clones of the mad scientist, who appear in different areas on the board and make life harder. Like, if there's too many clones in one area, then more red cubes come out of the machine, and so it just accelerates the end game failure condition if you don't get rid of them. But getting rid of them can get you some bonuses and stuff as well. Yeah, there's a lot of stuff you gotta micromanage, and there's 4 different ways you can play this game. They've got 4 different setup instructions, the basic version, and then 3 other ones with some slight rules, tweaks, and additions. Now, overall, game is enjoyable, and it certainly, production-wise, is really good. I like this artwork style they've used. It's like cartoony, and it kind of reminds me of like a Nickelodeon show, but the production quality on the tiles is good. You've got 2 separate rule books, one for the scenarios you can do and one for the main rules. Rules weren't too difficult to understand, 1 or 2 weird ambiguities, but nothing too crazy, nothing that you can't sort of think about a little bit longer and answer. I didn't really have to go on boardgamegeek and look up any rules, But, you know, big orange bag for the tokens, plastic cubes, a la Pandemic, this big little contraption in the middle that works just fine, these great big giant wooden meeples, it's kind of crazy. And it certainly does keep to this theme of almost like a kind of Nickelodeon kids show style of time travel. Right down to the fact that your characters are named all these weird names. I mean, you've got Mr. Time, which is kind of weird, the Time Prowler, V-Girl, Robo Finisher 404, like this like assassin android, and my personal favourite, who? And I'm not mispronouncing that on purpose. It is spelled ZZTWYZZEK. You try and pronounce that. Come on, it looks like some weird spider mutant thing, and basically we just have fun pronouncing this name as whatever we like. It's mad. This is definitely a kind of mad theme, but the game itself is generally quite enjoyable. I like particularly these cards that you can acquire that do different things. You're creating combos with other players, and there's definitely a high amount of teamwork and player interaction because one person cannot do everything themselves. You've got to coordinate your moves and actions with the other players. That aspect of this is really good fun. Now, yes, you do have 3 other ways you can play this game, but honestly, 90% of my players have used the normal basic game. 2 reasons for that. Firstly, the additions, the new stuff, don't improve the game that much dramatically. It's just a slight variance in the game. But then you have to learn these additional rules and tweaks to the old system, and I'm kind of like, you know what, if I'm teaching new people how to play this game, I don't want to overflow them with a bunch of weird, like, rules on top of rules. Just give them the normal game. It's enjoyable enough anyway. But the second reason, and this is kind of my bugbear with this game, and it's a big one, the punishing nature of it, the randomness of it is a big issue because when you play games like Pandemic and some of the other ones like Ghost Stories and a few other like co-op games, you get randomness happen. So random bad stuff happens and you've got to deal with it. In a decent co-op game, you will be able to mitigate that. Or you'll be on the back foot, but then you'll be able to pull it through. Games that I love, like Sentinels in the Multiverse and Spirit Island, for example, both put you on the back foot to begin with. But you feel like, even though it's hitting you when it can, that you can recover. That at some point you will pull it back. Fight more, you can pull it back, and then that turning point happens, and you eventually win, or you may still lose. But either way, you felt like you were in with a chance. Here, though, you can regularly call that you're not going to win this game after about half the game is done. And that's a problem, because the randomness of this machine and the red cubes means it's nigh on impossible to really predict what's going to happen. Because you've essentially got these 7 cards that you cycle through, and these dictate, oh, where's this thing going to do? So I'll flip on over and it says the medieval area. Right, let's point it over here, drop the cubes down, boom, there we go. And I apologise if there's some outcry noises, I don't know what they're doing there. But the idea is that you don't know where this machine's really going to turn up. Even by the time you get to the end of the cycle, it's still a 50-50 chance, and it could still be a massive difference as to whether one bit is really bad and one bit is really good. But with the first few cards in there, you've got no idea where this thing's going to turn up. It could turn up randomly. And there's a rule that I think you should house rule in this game. I forget the exact wording of it, but basically, I think you're supposed to draw agent tokens out of this bag and populate them on this board each round, based on the player count and what difficulty setting you're on and how far you are into the game. But you do it before you flip the card to see where the thing moves and drops cubes. That is super punishing, because you put in an extra cube for every clone that is in an area. So you might have a nice clean area at first, then you draw out the bag and you draw 2 separate clones that go into that particular era. Then the card flips over and says, point it at that era. So now, instead of 2 cubes that I'm putting in 4, because of the extra 2 clones. That has a massive, ramification on what can happen. I've had games literally end in failure because of poor luck with drawing out of the bag. And this happens a lot. That rule, I think, needs to be reversed, so that you do this machine thing, then do the clone drawing out of the bag. I think that is already something I will house rule in every single game. But this, like with everything else, does feel like a very punishing game. I'm not even certain if I've won it yet. I think I've won it once in solo, but other times I've just lost, because this game is incredibly difficult, really hard to win, and it doesn't necessarily feel like you lost because the decisions you made were bad. It just feels like you lost because the game just hates you. And there's no real catch-up in this. I mentioned Spirit Island and that before, where I said you can be on the back foot, but then you feel like you can pull it back and go on, yeah, and then punch the enemy and you're good. Here, though, I feel that when the game starts, like, you know, spitting on you, it's not going to stop. You don't feel like, oh, right, it's okay, we can mitigate this, we'll pull it back. No, it will just go from bad to worse. It starts off heavy, and then it gets heavy, and then it gets even more heavy. It's not gonna let itself go or make life easier. And I mentioned that this deck can go through 3 separate cycles before the game ends. Good luck with that. No way. This game will likely end in the second era if things don't go well for you, but each of those cycles you have to draw more of these clone tokens out the bag. I guarantee you, when you get to the 3rd cycle, assuming you've lasted that long, the game is going to end very shortly. Drawing 3 clones or more so out of this bag is incredibly punishing. You know, you will not get through to 21 cards. I think it's physically impossible to last that long. You know, and if you did, what on earth were you doing? Seriously, you should have ended the game by failure or success by then. But yeah, so you could have 21 turns, but chances are it's only going to be about 15, 16, and then the game will end, usually in failure. The player count is also a bit of an issue here. 1 to 4 players, says 60 minutes. 60 minutes is about right for this game. You could get through a game pretty quickly, and I think 60 minutes is good until you up this to about 3 or 4 players, and then you're talking more 90. This game can really go on a bit long because you're going to be discussing things with players, you know, what you're going to do on each turn, and all sorts. And so when you've got 4 of you doing that, it's going to drag this game out a bit longer. The other problem is the solo mode is good, but I think you should play it multi-handed, because true solo has you basically mixing all the cards into one big deck, and then you draw cards from the deck, and from that you essentially like decide which character am I going to put the card under. So I've got 3 characters here, and I'm going to say, right, well, I've drawn this one, that can go under you, that can go under you, that can go under you, and as soon as you match up several symbols, or like several of the same type of card symbol, then that character is the one that goes first. That is a cool mechanism, but the problem is, because all the cards are mixed up into one big deck, there's no consistency with the cards that you acquire or get through, so it does feel even more random on top of the randomness. So playing multi-handed is definitely the best way to do this solo. And certainly I think this game works better as a solo game when you do it multi-handed, or as a 2-player with someone else. 3 and 4 just drags out too much. On top of that though, the turn sequence is problematic, because yes, you are discussing stuff with other players, but there is a maximum of 21 rounds. Chances are you're only getting 15 to 16 rounds. Each round is a player's turn, which means that if you are playing by yourself, you get all 16 to 20 turns, like rounds, yourself to do things. If you're playing a 2-player game, that's cut in half. So one of you is getting, let's say on a good day, 8 rounds, and the other person's getting another 8 rounds. You divide that into 3 and 4 players, suddenly you realise that you've gone through this whole game of doing this stuff and discussing with other players, but you only really got to act on 3 or 4 rounds. That's not a lot by the time that the game ends. Yes, you are involved, yes, you are discussing stuff, but in terms of doing cool stuff with the cards and all that, it doesn't feel like you're really doing much. Even with the loop system, which has you basically able to replay the same card over again if you spend energy or have certain conditions, that's a cool mechanism, but you're only going to be able to loop so often, and maybe you'll get a cool funky turn, but it'll be short-lived, and then you're kind of back to just doing maybe 2 or 3 things on your turn, and that's kind of it. Sometimes you can have turns which are just completely pointless because the game just undid it straight after, or you just don't have the setup or the energy to be able to do very much. So with 3 or 4 players, I think this game just does not work. You know, I don't think it works at all, and I don't recommend it if you are going to do it with 3 or 4 players. Solo, I think this was good fun, but was it fun enough? 2-player, I think this works pretty well also. So with the loop overall, I like it, but I don't love it. This is a little bit of a disappointment for me. I love the way it looks, I love the way it's produced, and I think the card system is clever, but it's frustrating to find that this is so difficult to win, mainly just because the luck of the game is just so extreme. You know, you will lose games based purely on what card gets drawn out of there or how the cubes come out, because it comes out of 3 different ways and it's pretty even. So I could drop 5 cubes into this thing, all of them could come out in the same area. it's physically possible for it to do that, and well, maybe I want them to spread out a bit more, but again, it's random. They tend to spread more rather than get 5 in the same one, but even so, where it ends up, where it turns, the fact that sometimes you've got to be in the era it's facing, that can really mess you over. And when you lose your progress on these tiles, that is so crippling it's unreal. The idea that you could spend, like, you need to get 6 tokens on this in order to flip it. You get 4 or 5 and then by random chance the thing just points in your direction, mucks up the zone, you lose all your progress. At that point, game over. Do not even bother to continue with the rest of the game. If you lose that much progress, you're done. You cannot physically pull it back. It just, and that does irk me. I feel with Pandemic, even Ghost Stories, I feel you can mitigate the luck a bit better in it. And that's saying something. But Pandemic and all these other games, the luck factor is just more mitigatable. Here, you can't mitigate it enough. And that does hurt this one badly. But as I say, it's still enjoyable. You just have to consider how much that's going to irk you and only really play this with 1 or 2 players. So overall, I don't think this is a great game. I don't even think this is going to be I mean, it is well produced, not too easy, but then I don't play with the scenarios. I'm giving this, I'm torn between a 5 or a 6. I think I'm going to give it a 5 overall though. It's an average game, has its good moments, but I think there's just some design tweaking it needed, doesn't scale well, and you don't get to do enough on your turns, even with the loop system, so I feel that it's missing a few things here and there. But 5 for me, like I say, it was worth playing, but just didn't really hit the mark. So that's it for me on this episode of The Broken Meeple. If you like what you see, please remember to leave a like and comment on the video. Let me know your thoughts on this and other co-op games. Until next time, you can check out my reviews recently for the Book of Rituals from Board and Dice, and of course, Dixit Stellar from Libellude. Until next time, remember as always, it's only a game. Bye for now.